Hi everybody, my name is Mattia Chiappa, I hope you're well. Yeah, sorry about the title of the video, I know. It's just really difficult to get people to watch, man. Of course, I don't think there is anything wrong with this type of music. It's just me. I personally twitch every time I try to do something that is even remotely fashionable, including ostinatos and brams and all that. Frankly, I don't even have the right sound or know what people use today. Is it monster brass? So naturally, I asked myself, what if I had to do that? Can I still make it interesting and do my own thing at the same time without using a billion different layers? Well, sort of. I don't know, I guess the end result was alright, but it's certainly different from what you would normally expect from an epic kind of piece. Right, so in order to do this, the very first thing I had to do was, of course, coming up with a piece. The undisputed king of ostinatos likes writing in D, and since I'm a hopeless fanboy, that was my starting point, but not really. And that brings me to my first step. So as I said, my starting point will be D minor. My very first instinct was to write something that is not committing to, a specific chord. So I ended up doing something like this. As you can see, this particular sequence of notes, these 4 notes, don't make use of F and B flat. So these 4 notes alone, without any kind of harmonic context, wouldn't tell you much about, the key of the piece or what kind of progression could be put underneath. So that for me was a good starting point because it kind of allowed me to put different chords against it and they would all kind of work. You might want to be careful with that last one because, B natural can clash with C. I kind of like dissonance in my music, but I understand it might not be something that everybody likes. What makes it interesting, in my opinion, is the fact that some of the chords that I just played kind of change the moment you put them against the ostinato, because you have all sorts of interesting extensions, like, for example, here on B flat, right? You have some kind of Lydian chord with a major 7th and a sharp 11th. What I ended up doing in the piece was, trying to balance, darkness with lightness, trying to change it up at times and, not being too predictable with the harmony. And because, yes, everything kind of works in D, but I'm not sticking to any particular diatonic key. Like, for example, I mentioned that B flat chord that could be, related to D minor, but I'm also making use of G major, which has B natural, and then I had a D major as well. So the tonal center kind of shifts in a few places, and it gives the piece an unpredictable kind of quality, playing with tension and resolution, darkness and lightness. When I first started to write the piece, I was feeling it in D, but near the end I was hearing it in A, and coming back to the piece today, I'm kind of feeling both keys at the same time. It's a very strange feeling and it's kind of difficult to describe. Aside from what I just played on piano, what actually happens in the real piece for the accompaniment are some slow-moving chords taken by low strings and woodwinds or brass. Something to add on top of what we just talked about is how the chords are played in a very low kind of register. That was a conscious decision because, the further away we get from middle C, the harder it is to tell what chord it is that we're playing. And having such low voicing kind of gives the piece a very mysterious kind of vibe, which is fitting with the non-committal harmony as well. And of course, I've taken inspiration from Hans Zimmer's music for the show The Crown. How good is that show, by the way? The accompaniment is only the foundation for the harmony. There's actually a lot more going on in the rest of the orchestra, coloring the ostinato with interesting harmonies, rhythms, and counterpoint. What you will hear me trying to do here is basically embellish the ostinato with other parts, not only to make it sound thicker, but also to give the impression at times of having a different sequence of notes. Have a listen to this. So that first section is a little bit reminiscent of electric counterpoint. I can't quite remember how it's called. By Steve Reich, of course, which is, of course, a masterpiece. And I'm going to break it down very briefly. There are quite a few different things happening, and I just want to show you guys what I did. So basically, the main ostinato is at the moment on harp and clarinet, I believe. Let's have a listen to that. Yes. And on top of that, we have flutes, just coloring it, playing the very same kind of pattern, but starting from a different note. And on top of this, we have more things. We have bassoons playing an entirely different rhythm. And we have glockenspiel doing something entirely different as well. While violins and violas are just basically playing some chords, just to reinforce the harmony a little bit. So let me put the ostinato on top. It's quite strange, isn't it? On top of all this, we have a few other stuff as well. We have a counter melody on oboe and English horn, and some piano embellishments as well. What's happening after this, I've kind of made the ostinato the bass line, giving it to cellos and double basses. And so that was what you heard before. And the rest of the strings are playing the chords. While bassoon and bass clarinet carry on with the same rhythm they had before. And the last section of the piece was a similar kind of concept to what we played before, but with the ostinato on violins and the embellishments on woodwinds. But of course, we have the ostinato on top as well. The third and last step was to structure the piece in such a way that it keeps moving without necessarily building all the time. The way I achieved that was by simply creating contrast within the different sections. Remember, I don't want to use a billion different layers, so I kind of had to get creative, meaning trying different combinations of instruments, but also giving it a fair bit of push and pull in order to, give the impression of a bigger, more epic kind of sound. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about as soon as I play the piece for you. So following up on what I just said, the piece really has a simple structure. What I'm trying to do here is alternating sections with higher kind of dynamics with lower dynamics. And just, to make it a little bit more interesting, because I didn't want to keep adding sounds on top of each other. And I didn't necessarily want to have parts looping. I'm still kind of trying to plant anchors, for the audience to latch onto. Like, for example, the part that we have at the beginning here has a very similar orchestration to what happens in the middle part of the piece and to what happens at the end, with low woodwinds and brass taking the accompaniment with those slow swells. And that is so that people can recognize that that's the piece. And then I have a couple of bridges really at the end of both sections, that part that we talked about before in more detail, and this part over here which with some interesting piano chords. Let's have a listen to this. I'm still trying to emulate this style of music as well. I'm using percussion quite heavily, with toms and taikos and all that. And I have a couple of swells on brass, like over here, which is part of the style as well, So I'm not entirely getting rid of it, just, for my own vanity. A really simple piece. I really enjoyed making this. It was a really, really fun experiment. Alright guys, that's it. Like the video, subscribe if you're new. As always, project files will be available on my Patreon. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.